Picture this: a lone Templar ship slicing through the moonlit waves of the Mediterranean, its sails taut against the wind, carrying secrets more valuable than gold. The Knights Templar weren't just warriors clad in white mantles. They were masterminds of a hidden economic empire, their wealth stretching far beyond the battlefields of the Holy Land. While history remembers them as fierce crusaders, their true power lay in something far more elusive: a web of clandestine naval routes that connected 3 continents, turning them into the medieval world's most influential bankers and traders. How did a religious order of knights come to dominate trade from the bustling ports of Europe to the spice markets of the Middle East and the gold routes of North Africa? The answer lies not in swords or sieges, but in maps whispered about in shadowed chambers, in ships that moved under cover of darkness, and in a system of finance so advanced it would rival modern banking. This is the untold story of the Templars' maritime mastery, a tale of ambition, secrecy, and sheer ingenuity. Imagine the audacity it took to build a network so vast, yet so carefully concealed, that even kings and popes struggled to trace its full extent. Their ships didn't just carry pilgrims and soldiers. They transported silks from Constantinople, spices from Alexandria, and silver from mines deep in Europe, all while evading pirates, rival merchants, and jealous monarchs. But the real genius wasn't just in what they traded, it was in how they moved it. The Templars didn't rely on luck or brute force. They crafted a system of safe harbors, encrypted ledgers, and trusted agents, creating a supply chain that functioned like clockwork centuries before the term existed. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of history's most fascinating puzzles: the secret naval routes that powered the Templars' unimaginable wealth. We'll follow the trail of forgotten maps, decode the strategies that kept their operations hidden, and uncover how a group of knights outmaneuvered empires without firing a single shot. This isn't just a story about money or power, it's about how vision, discipline, and a willingness to defy convention can rewrite the rules of an era. By the end of this journey, you'll see the medieval world through new eyes, and you might just wonder what other secrets still lie buried beneath the waves of time. So ready your curiosity, we're setting sail into the past. At first glance, the Knights Templar seemed like just another order of holy warriors, sworn to protect Christian pilgrims on the dangerous roads to Jerusalem. But their true legacy wasn't written in blood on the battlefield. It was etched in ink on balance sheets and shipping manifests. What began as a simple mission to safeguard travelers spiraled into something far grander. Picture those early Templars stationed along the pilgrim routes, watching merchants and nobles struggle to carry heavy coin purses through bandit-infested lands. The knights realized something revolutionary. The real power wasn't in guarding gold, it was in controlling its movement. So they built a system that would make modern financiers envious. Imagine a medieval merchant wanting to fund a trading expedition from Paris to Acre. Instead of risking his life hauling chests of silver across hostile territory, he could deposit his wealth at a Templar commandery in France and receive a coded letter of credit. With that single parchment, he could withdraw the equivalent sum from any Templar outpost along his journey. No armed guards, no fear of theft. This wasn't just convenient, it was transformative. Suddenly, wealth could travel faster and safer than ever before, greasing the wheels of trade from London to Damascus. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. The Templars didn't just invent medieval banking, they perfected the art of discretion. Kings trusted them because they were bound by sacred vows, unlike secular bankers who might fleece their clients. Popes relied on them because their loyalty was to the church, not to crowns or crowns. Even rival merchants used their services because the Templars never played favorites. Their ledgers were as impartial as they were encrypted. This reputation for trust turned their commanderies into the first international branches of a financial empire, where a French nobleman's deposit could fund a Venetian silk purchase or an Egyptian spice order with just a few strokes of a quill. Yet none of this would have been possible without their hidden ace, the ships that moved silently between these nodes of power. Those letters of credit were only as good as the actual silver and goods backing them up, and that's where the Templars' naval network became their lifeline. While their land-based banking drew the spotlight, their fleet of sleek, fast-moving vessels worked in the shadows, shuttling bullion from mines in Germany to ports in Marseille, transporting silks from Byzantium to markets in Barcelona, all while avoiding the greedy eyes of pirates and tax collectors. They didn't just move money on paper, they moved the physical wealth that made that paper valuable, and they did it with a level of secrecy that would make even the most cunning modern spy agency nod in respect. This was the Templars' true innovation, a seamless fusion of finance and logistics, where trust above ground was matched by precision below decks. Their ships didn't just carry cargo, they carried the invisible threads that stitched together 3 continents into a single economic web. And as we'll soon see, that web would become both their greatest strength and their most dangerous vulnerability. The Mediterranean of the Templars' era was a swirling mosaic of commerce and conflict, where the fate of empires rode on the tides. Every harbor from Constantinople to Cadiz hummed with the clamor of merchants haggling over spices that could outweigh gold ounce for ounce pepper from Malabar, cinnamon from Ceylon, cloves from the distant Moluccas. Silks from Byzantine looms changed hands beside ivory carved in Alexandria, while Venetian glass and Flemish wool jostled for space in ships' holds alongside something even more precious, holy relics, fragments of saints and martyrs that could turn a cathedral into a pilgrimage site overnight. This wasn't just trade, it was a high-stakes game where a single shipload could bankrupt a prince or crown a new merchant king. Yet for all its glittering rewards, the sea was a merciless partner. Pirates lurked in the coves of Crete and the Balearics, ready to swarm any vessel that strayed from convoy. Rival city-states like Genoa and Pisa turned their naval might into floating toll booths, demanding tribute from weaker fleets. Even the weather conspired against merchants. Autumn storms could sink a fortune in hours, leaving no trace but a few splintered planks. Control these waters, and you didn't just move goods, you held the throttle of entire economies. That's why the great maritime republics built towering war galleys and fortified ports, their wealth measured not just in coin but in the number of ships they could muster. Enter the Templars, who played the game by an entirely different set of rules. While Venetian merchants flaunted their gilded fleets and Genoese admirals staged grand naval parades, the knights moved like shadows. Their ships were smaller, faster, and crucially unmarked. No brightly painted crests announced their arrivals, no trumpets heralded their departures. They operated on a simple principle: the less attention drawn, the safer the cargo. A Templar vessel might dock at night, offload onto waiting wagons before dawn, and vanish back into the mist before the harbor master even rubbed the sleep from his eyes. What made their system truly revolutionary wasn't just stealth, it was synergy. While rival traders had to negotiate with customs officials at every port, the Templars owned their own docks. Their commanderies in Marseille, Acre, and Cyprus doubled as secure transfer points, where goods could shift from ship to shore without passing through a dozen greedy hands. A shipment of Tyrian purple dye bound for Paris might bypass 4 middlemen, cutting costs and eliminating leaks of information. And information in this world was currency. Know when a spice shipment was delayed by a storm in the Adriatic, and you could buy up local stocks before prices soared. Hear whispers of a sultan's embargo on Egyptian cotton, and your agents in Sicily could pivot to Syrian suppliers. The Templars didn't just react to the market, they anticipated it. This web of trade and intelligence gave them an edge no purely commercial fleet could match. While Venetian merchants dazzled with public auctions and elaborate contracts, the Templars dealt in quiet promises and sealed ledgers. A king needing to fund a war could borrow from their reserves with a handshake, knowing his debt wouldn't be gossiped about in taverns. A bishop sending alms to the Holy Land could trust that his gold wouldn't vanish en route, as so often happened with secular shippers. The knight's reputation for integrity, backed by the terrifying penalty of excommunication for any brother caught stealing, made them the ultimate guarantors in a world where trust was rarer than rubies. But beneath this veneer of respectability flowed currents of raw pragmatism. The same order that built hospitals for pilgrims also maintained a network of informants in every major port, from the fish markets of Barcelona to the coffee houses of Alexandria. They knew which customs officials could be bribed, which pirate captains would look the other way for a cut, and which storms were likely to close the Straits of Messina next month. While their rivals obsessed over tariffs and treaties, the Templars mastered the human element, the winks, nods, and carefully misplaced documents that made the real difference between profit and ruin. In an age where most trade was still local, they thought globally, acting as the silent switchboard connecting 3 continents. Yet their greatest advantage lay in something even subtler: patience. Merchant princes lived and died by quarterly profits, but the Templars played the long game. A single Templar ship might spend years slowly acquiring strategic parcels of land along the Rhone River, until one day they controlled every viable docking point between Lyon and the sea. They'd buy up debts of struggling wine growers in Languedoc, not to collect but to ensure those vineyards' future shipments moved exclusively on Templar barges. While others chased immediate windfalls, the Knights planted seeds that would bear fruit decades later, building not just a fleet but an ecosystem. And that's how a brotherhood of warrior monks came to hold the reins of medieval globalization, not by conquering the sea, but by understanding its rhythms better than anyone else. Historians have long debated whether the Templars truly commanded their own fleet or simply chartered ships from allies, but the truth lies buried in dusty port ledgers and half-forgotten chronicles. While some argue the Knights were too pious to dirty their hands with ship ownership, records from Marseille and Genoa tell a different story. Take the case of La Rochelle, the Templars' most infamous Atlantic harbor. Tax rolls from the 13th century list dozens of vessels registered to the order, their cargoes ranging from wool and wine to something far more intriguing: unmarked crates labeled only with cryptic symbols. These weren't rented hulls, they were Templar property, crewed by men who swore oaths of secrecy alongside their nautical ones. What made La Rochelle so vital wasn't just its deep harbor or strategic position, it was the way the Templars transformed it into a financial nexus. Imagine a ship arriving from England, its hold packed with Cornish tin. Instead of selling it locally, the Templars would warehouse it until prices spiked in Moorish Spain, then dispatch it on one of their Mediterranean vessels. By controlling every link in the chain from the docks to the ledgers, they eliminated the middlemen who siphoned profits from ordinary merchants, and that's why their rivals whispered about ghost ships slipping in and out of fog-bound coves. The genius of their fleet lay in its invisibility. While Venetian merchants proudly flew the Lion of St. Mark, Templar ships bore no distinctive flags or painted hulls. A Templar vessel might resemble a humble Catalan trader by day, only to offload Templar silver under cover of darkness. Port officials in Cyprus reported ships arriving with falsified manifests, their real cargoes diverted to hidden warehouses before dawn. Even their crews were masters of disguise. Some chronicles describe sailors who switched between the robes of merchants, pilgrims, or fishermen as needed. But the most compelling evidence comes from the Templars' own downfall. When King Philip Roman IV of France moved to arrest the Knights in 1307, his agents scrambled to seize their assets only to find key ports eerily empty. At La Rochelle, an entire fleet had vanished overnight, sparking legends that endure to this day. Some claim the ships fled to Scotland with Templar treasures. Others insist they were scuttled in secret locations, their holds still heavy with unrecovered wealth. Whatever their fate, one thing is clear. This was no ad hoc collection of borrowed vessels, but a precision-built network that evaporated like mist when threatened, proof that the Templars' naval power was as real as it was elusive. Their harbors tell the rest of the story. From the fortified docks of Acre to the hidden inlets of Portugal, Templar ports shared uncanny similarities: deep water access, dual-purpose commanderies that functioned as banks and barracks, and most tellingly, underground tunnels linking quayside to storerooms. In Colliery, modern archaeologists found a network of cellars stretching beneath the old Templar quarter, their walls still bearing the charcoal marks of inventory tallies. These weren't makeshift operations, they were the medieval equivalent of secure logistics hubs, designed to move goods faster and quieter than any competitor. So why the debate? Because the Templars themselves cultivated the myth that they relied on allies. It served them to let rivals underestimate their reach, to play the humble monks while their ships crisscrossed the seas. But the paper trail doesn't lie: customs exemptions granted by popes, lawsuits filed by jealous merchants, even the frantic inventories drawn up after their arrest. All point to a fleet that was as carefully managed as their famed treasury. The real question isn't whether they had ships, but how a handful of knights outmaneuvered the greatest maritime powers of their age, and why we're still piecing together the truth 8 centuries later. La Rochelle wasn't just another port on the Atlantic coast, it was the Templars' secret weapon in the west, a sheltered harbor where storm waves broke against limestone cliffs instead of splintering precious ships. Nestled along France's western edge, this unassuming town held a geographical ace. It lay just far enough from the English Channel to avoid the worst of North Sea gales, yet close enough to catch the prevailing winds that carried ships swiftly to England's wool markets and Flanders' bustling trade fairs. But the real magic of La Rochelle wasn't just in its location. It was in how the Templars transformed it into a financial and logistical hub that would make modern supply chain managers gasp. Picture the scene. Beneath the vaulted ceilings of La Rochelle's commandery, scribes meticulously recorded shipments of silver from mines in the massive central, each ingot stamped with the Templar cross. That silver didn't gather dust in vaults, it flowed like water through an invisible network. Packed into unmarked barrels labeled as wine or salt, it traveled on Templar ships to ports like Southampton, where it bought English wool. That wool then sailed east to Flanders, where Flemish weavers transformed it into coveted cloth, which in turn fetched premium prices in Mediterranean markets. The genius, every leg of this journey profited the order, not just from transport fees but from the arbitrage of buying low in one region and selling high in another. Yet the most tantalizing mysteries lie beneath La Rochelle's cobbled streets. For centuries, locals whispered of tunnels snaking from the harbor to hidden chambers beneath the Templar fortress, passageways wide enough for 2 men to carry a chest side by side. Modern ground-penetrating radar has confirmed cavities under the old Templar quarter, their purpose still debated. Were they mere storage cellars or something far more intriguing? Consider this: when French royal troops stormed La Rochelle after the Templars' arrest, they found the treasury nearly empty. Had the knights smuggled their wealth through those tunnels to waiting ships under cover of darkness? The inventory lists from that raid tell a curious tale, missing not just gold and silver, but entire chests of documents, maps, and ledgers. What made La Rochelle truly exceptional was its role as a pivot point between two worlds. To the east, Templar routes stretched overland to the Mediterranean. To the west, their ships could reach England in days or venture south to the salt pans of Portugal. This dual access let them play markets against each other with ruthless precision. When Bordeaux wine flooded French markets, La Rochelle's captains quietly diverted shipments to England, where demand kept prices high. When political tensions slowed trade between Flanders and Italy, the Templars' Atlantic route became a lucrative alternative. They didn't just adapt to market shifts, they engineered them. The port's design reveals how deeply the Templars understood maritime trade. Unlike the open quays of Mediterranean harbors, La Rochelle's docks were shielded by a fortified seawall, allowing discreet nighttime unloading. Its warehouses featured double walls, an outer shell of stone, and an inner lining of cedar to repel moisture and pests, preserving delicate cargoes like spices or silk. Even the local tides worked in their favor. The strong ebb currents swept ships swiftly into open water, while the flood tides brought them back without lengthy waits. Nature itself seemed to conspire with the Order's ambitions. Today, walking La Rochelle's old harbor, you can still trace fragments of this legacy. The worn grooves in stone where Templar carts rolled, the odd cellar that suddenly drops deeper than city records say it should. But the greatest testament to their vision isn't in the stones. It's in the very idea of a port as more than docks and warehouses. The Templars saw La Rochelle as a living engine of commerce, where geography, timing, and secrecy combined to create something unprecedented, a medieval version of offshore banking hidden in plain sight. And that's why, 8 centuries later, we're still piecing together the clues they left behind, not just in dusty archives, but in the very layout of a town built for secrets. Marseille's sun-baked harbor thrummed with an energy unlike any other in medieval Europe, a chaotic symphony of Provençal merchants haggling over Tunisian olive oil, Genoese sailors unloading bolts of Damascus silk, and burly dockworkers rolling casks of Cretan wine toward shadowed warehouses. To most, it was simply the busiest port on the western Mediterranean, but to the Templars, Marseille was something far more strategic, the linchpin of their entire eastern trade network. While La Rochelle dominated their Atlantic operations, Marseille served as the perfect gateway to the riches of the Levant, its deep harbor bristling with ships bound for Acre, Tyre, and beyond. What set Marseille apart wasn't just geography, it was privilege. The Templars didn't merely dock here, they operated with near-sovereign authority. Papal bulls granted them extraordinary exemptions, no tariffs on goods marked with their cross, no mandatory inspections by local officials, not even the usual waiting periods imposed on foreign merchants. Imagine the advantage this gave them. While a Venetian trader might lose days and a sizable cut of his profits to customs delays, a Templar galley could offload its cargo of Cypriot copper or Armenian cochineal dye and have it whisked into their walled compound before competitors finished mooring. This wasn't just efficiency, it was economic warfare waged with parchment and seals instead of swords. Their commandery in Marseille stood as a fortress within a city, its high walls hiding a labyrinth of storerooms that would have made Ali Baba gasp. Contemporary accounts describe vaults stacked with fragrant sacks of Aleppan pistachios, crates of blown glass from Sidon so delicate it was packed in raw wool, and amphorae of Rhodian wine aging in cool cellars. But the real treasure lay in the mundane. iron ingots from Burgundy, Baltic amber, and Flemish wool, goods that could be traded at staggering markups in Crusader states desperate for European commodities. The Templars didn't just stockpile luxury items, they mastered the art of moving bulk goods where they'd fetch the highest prices. Their true innovation, though, lay in how they manipulated time itself. Mediterranean shipping followed seasonal rhythms, dangerous in winter, frantic in summer. Most merchants accepted these constraints, but the Templars bent them to their will. Their access to papal couriers meant they received advance word of events like the fall of Damietta or a truce in Antioch, allowing them to dispatch ships before rivals even heard the news. They maintained a fleet of lightweight tartanes, swift, shallow-drafted vessels that could navigate autumn's tricky winds when heavier merchant cogs stayed grounded. While others waited for spring, the Templars were already selling next season's spices at last season's prices. Yet Marseille's greatest value was as a clearinghouse for information. Within the commandery's scriptorium, scribes maintained meticulous records not just of Templar shipments, but of market fluctuations from Alexandria to Aragon. A scribe noting rising demand for saffron in Barcelona could alert their brethren in Acre to secure more from Persian traders. This real-time intelligence network turned their warehouses into a medieval version of a commodities exchange, where goods were pre-sold before they even left the Levant. The system was so refined that some scholars believe they pioneered early forms of futures contracts, agreeing today's price for next year's shipment of Tyrian purple or Cretan raisins. The genius of their Marseille operation becomes clearest when you consider the competition. Genoese merchants might dominate the alum trade, Venetians the spice routes, but no single faction could match the Templars' ability to connect disparate markets. A single Templar agent could orchestrate a deal moving English tin to Syria, Syrian glass to Egypt, and Egyptian papyrus to Paris, skimming profits at every transfer while competitors handled just one leg of the journey. Their commandery wasn't just a warehouse, it was the nerve center of a pan-Mediterranean operation that treated 3 continents like sections of a single marketplace. Walk the Via port today, past the fishmongers' stalls and cafe terraces, and you're tracing the ghosts of this vanished empire. The exact location of their main quay is lost beneath modern embankments, but occasional discoveries hint at its scale. A 13th-century anchor dredged from the harbor mud, its flukes stamped with a faint cross, cellar walls near La Major Cathedral showing Templar masonry marks. These fragments whisper of a time when Marseille wasn't just a city of merchants, but the beating heart of an invisible network that for nearly 2 centuries made a brotherhood of warrior monks the silent masters of Mediterranean trade. Acre's towering seawalls rose from the Levantine coast like a final defiant gesture of the Crusader dream, a last bastion of Christian rule in a region slipping through their fingers. By the late 13th century, the Kingdom of Jerusalem had crumbled to a sliver of coastline, and Acre stood as its beating heart. But while kings and bishops fretted over holy war, the Templars saw something far more enduring in this sun-scorched port, the ultimate trade nexus, where spices from the east met silver from the west, and where faith mattered less than profit margins. Even as Crusader zeal faded, the Knights transformed Acre into an economic powerhouse that hummed with a rare kind of harmony, one where Muslim spice merchants haggled with Jewish moneylenders under the watchful eyes of Templar bankers, all united by the universal language of commerce. Walk through Acre's bustling suck in its heyday, and you'd witness a scene that defied the era's religious divides. Venetian traders in embroidered silks sampled dates from Damascus, while Templar sergeants inspected bolts of Egyptian linen destined for Parisian cloisters. Armenian Christians brokered deals between Mongol envoys and Genoese ship captains, their negotiations smoothed by Templar-stamped letters of credit. This wasn't just coexistence, it was a meticulously engineered system where the order acted as both guarantor and beneficiary. When a Muslim merchant sold indigo dye to a Pisan buyer, the Templars took a cut for providing the secure warehouse. When Jewish goldsmiths advanced loans to Crusader nobles, the Knights ensured repayment through their network of commanderies. Acre thrived not despite its diversity, but because of it, and the Templars, sworn to defend Christendom, became unlikely champions of this pragmatic pluralism. Beneath the surface of this vibrant marketplace lay the true marvel, the Templars' underground city. Modern excavations reveal a labyrinth of tunnels connecting the harbor to their fortress, wide enough for 2 carts to pass. These weren't just escape routes, they were logistical arteries. Spices arriving from caravan routes could move from camelback to ships hauled without ever seeing daylight, avoiding both theft and tariffs. The Order's vaults beneath Acre's streets held not just treasure but something far more valuable, meticulously kept records of debts, shipments, and mercantile alliances stretching from Provence to Persia. A merchant from Barcelona might deposit funds in Acre to finance his nephew's trading venture in Baghdad, all tracked in the Knights' encrypted ledgers. Yet the Templars' most audacious move was their embrace of the very cultures they'd sworn to oppose. While preaching holy war, they quietly adopted Islamic financial instruments like the Hawala system, a form of trust-based transfer perfected by Arab traders. They employed Jewish scholars to translate Arabic market reports, giving them an edge in anticipating price shifts. Even their famed maritime maps borrowed from the work of Muslim geographers, annotated with Templar symbols marking safe anchorages and pirate havens. This wasn't hypocrisy, it was a cold-eyed recognition that faith stopped at the water's edge when it came to business. Then came the spring of 1291, when the Mamluks massed outside Acre's walls with siege engines that dwarfed the city's defenses. As panic spread, the Templars executed an evacuation so precise it still baffles historians. Witnesses reported their ships loading through secret sea gates for weeks before the final assault, carrying not just gold and relics, but chests of documents, the real keys to their empire. The last Templar Knights held the retreating line long enough for their treasurer to escape with what chroniclers called the heart of their wealth, sparking legends of lost treasures aboard ghost galleys. But the greater mystery isn't what they took, it's what they left behind. Hidden chambers beneath Acre's ruins still yield fragments of their dual legacy. A crusader's sword lying beside Arabic accounting manuals, silent testaments to the Order's greatest secret, that true power lay not in conquest but in connection. The bustling docks of Genoa tell a story the history books often miss, where the Templars didn't just compete with merchant republics, they quietly co-opted them. At first glance, the relationship seemed adversarial. The Knights were holy warriors sworn to poverty, while Genoa's traders flaunted their gold-chained opulence. But scratch beneath the surface, and you'd find a web of mutual benefit woven with the subtlety of a master spy. The Templars needed ships without drawing attention. The Genoese needed capital without the risks of distant ventures. So they struck deals whispered over cups of Cypriot wine, Templar silver financing merchant voyages in exchange for cargo space, naval intelligence, and something even more valuable, deniability. Take the case of the San Giovanni, a Genoese galley that sailed for Alexandria in 1284 with a hold full of Lombard iron. Official manifests listed its backers as a consortium of Genoese nobles, but buried in the Archivio di Stato are lone documents bearing faint Templar sigils. The Knights hadn't just funded the voyage, they'd insured it through their Levantine contacts, guaranteeing the Genoese a profit even if pirates struck. In return, half the cargo space secretly carried Templar goods, unmarked barrels of Armenian cochineal dye and Sicilian sulfur, commodities the Order could sell at triple the price in Flanders. The brilliance: if the ship were seized, the Genos took the public loss while the Templars' involvement vanished like mist. Pisa played a different but equally vital role. Unlike Genoa's globe-spanning ambitions, Pisan merchants specialized in short-haul routes perfect for the Templars' need to move small, high-value items discreetly. A Pisan cog might ferry pilgrims from Marseille to Acre, its lower decks crammed with chests of Templar-minted silver bezants under piles of penitents' luggage. The Knights even funded Pisa's shipyards, ensuring priority access to the fastest light galleys. In one surviving contract, the order commissioned 12 vessels for the defense of Christendom, yet port records show those same ships running regular cargo between Tunis and Venice within the year. The ruse was transparent yet unprovable. Who could accuse monks of profiteering when their ships bore crosses instead of cargo manifests? Barcelona's collaboration was the most audacious. Here, the Templars didn't just work with merchants, they became them. The city's Liber del Consolat de Mar, a maritime legal codex, contains clauses quietly favoring certain ecclesiastical transporters, exempting their goods from standard inspections. Catalan captains in Templar employ developed ingenious smuggling tricks: hollow masts stuffed with saffron, false hull compartments hiding Sicilian grain reserved for famine-struck Alexandria. The Knights' greatest coup came through the commander system, where they'd front capital to Barcelonan merchants in exchange for a share of profits, an early form of venture capitalism that let them tap into Iberia's booming leather and olive oil trades without ever appearing on the ledgers. These alliances gave the Templars something no fleet of their own could: plausible anonymity. When a Venetian warship intercepted a Pisan vessel carrying Templar bullion, the Knights simply produced forged documents showing the metal belonged to the King of Naples. When Genos rivals grew suspicious of their influence, the Order strategically called in loans to bankrupt troublesome competitors, then funded their replacements. They played maritime powers against each other like chess pieces, backing Barcelona's bid for trade privileges in Tunis one year, then leaking intelligence to Genoa about the same routes the next. The real masterstroke was how they turned these cities into unwitting intelligence hubs. A Genos captain might casually mention Berber pirate movements to his Templar confessor. A Pisan factor in Acre could report Mamluk troop deployments under the guise of market gossip. By the time rivals realized the Knights weren't just passengers in Mediterranean trade but its puppet masters, the Templars had already rewired the system, their wealth flowing as invisibly as currents beneath the waves. The Templars didn't just sail the Mediterranean, they deciphered it, treating the sea's chaotic waves like lines of a sacred text waiting to be read. While most medieval navigators clung to coastlines, terrified of venturing beyond sight of land, the Knights' ships cut straight across open water with eerie precision. Their secret, a combination of borrowed wisdom and monastic discipline that turned their voyages into exercises in mathematical grace. At the heart of their prowess lay the Portolan chart, a web of crisscrossing lines radiating from compass roses, so accurate that modern scholars have matched them to satellite imagery with startling fidelity. These weren't the fanciful maps of the time, littered with sea monsters and biblical scenes. Templar portolans were stripped-down masterpieces of utility, showing depth soundings, hidden reefs, and even notes on seasonal currents. One surviving fragment from Marseille marks a seemingly empty stretch of Libyan coast with an odd notation. Here the water remembers the land. Oceanographers now recognize it as a reference to underwater freshwater springs, a vital resupply point known only to local fishermen and somehow the Templars. Their real edge came from instruments most merchants considered sorcery. While sailors elsewhere still navigated by star lore passed down in chanties, Templar ships carried astrolabes adapted from Arab designs, their brass faces engraved with both Latin and Arabic numerals. A Venetian trader's memoir from 1273 describes watching a Templar captain take a lunar reading during an autumn storm, then calmly adjusting course while other ships floundered. He consulted no pilot, no coastal landmark, the merchant wrote, only that cursed brass wheel and a parchment he kept folded in his sleeve. Rumors swirled about the origins of their knowledge. Some whispered of secret treaties with Arab navigators in Alexandria, where Templar envoys supposedly traded European silver for scrolls from the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. Others pointed to the Order's early excavations beneath Jerusalem's Temple Mount, where crusaders may have uncovered Roman naval logs from the Empire's forgotten Red Sea fleet. Whatever the source, their techniques had a unifying thread: standardization. Every Templar ship operated by the same protocols, logs kept in identical cipher, sails trimmed to precise angles, watches changed at intervals measured by sandglasses filled from a master timer in Acre. This wasn't just efficiency, it was the medieval equivalent of algorithmic precision. The true testament to their mastery wasn't in fair weather, but in disaster. When a storm scattered a Templar convoy off Crete in 1289, the fleet's ships didn't straggle into port over weeks like other merchants. They regrouped at a predetermined set of coordinates within hours. Survivors from a wrecked Pisan vessel later testified that the Knights had marked their meeting point not by any island or lighthouse, but by a nearly imperceptible shift in watercolor indicating a deep sea current. Such knowledge didn't come from charts alone. It spoke of generations of accumulated observation, encoded into initiation rites. Yet the most tantalizing clues lie in what hasn't been found. No complete Templar naval manual survives. Only oblique references in trial records a Sicilian sailor's claim of seeing a map that showed winds as threads woven by God's hand, or a Genoa stockmaster's complaint about Templar captains refusing to share their tide tables for the Hellespont. These fragments suggest the Order didn't just use navigation tools, they curated a living database of maritime knowledge, constantly updated by their network of coastal commanderies. Imagine the advantage. While rival merchants relied on the same rutted sea lanes, Templar ships could exploit forgotten shortcuts, a springtime backcurrent here, a moonlit channel there, shaving weeks off voyage times. Perhaps their greatest innovation was treating navigation as sacred geometry. To the Templars, the sea wasn't a void to be feared, but a clockwork system to be decoded. Their ships moved with the confidence of men who believed God had written the ocean's patterns in a language only they could read. And in an age when most still saw the Mediterranean as a realm of chaos, that faith, backed by cold, hard data, made them the closest thing the medieval world had to masters of time and space. Beneath the white mantles and pious vows, the Templars wielded naval power with a ruthlessness that would make any pirate captain nod in grim approval. While their official mandate was protecting Christian pilgrims, their ships often sailed under a different banner, one of calculated predation. The Mediterranean became their hunting ground, where the line between holy war and high seas robbery blurred into oblivion. Papal bulls granted them the right to seize infidel vessels, a privilege they exploited with chilling efficiency. A Mamluk merchant ship laden with Indian spices might find itself surrounded at dawn by Templar galleys, their crews boarding not with the chaotic frenzy of common pirates, but with the disciplined violence of monks who knew exactly which cargo holds held the most valuable goods. Yet their targets weren't always Muslim. Venetian merchants trading legally with Alexandria sometimes returned to port with tales of mysterious attacks, ships bearing no flags, crews speaking no recognizable dialect, striking with precision before vanishing into the mist. The pattern was always the same. Only certain commodities were taken, always the ones fetching the highest prices in European markets: silk, pepper, mercury for alchemists. No witnesses could positively identify the assailants, but the timing was suspicious. These raids spiked whenever the Templars faced expensive construction projects or needed to replenish their war chests. A Genos captain's log from 1282 describes an encounter that chills the blood. Attackers who ignored gold coins but methodically emptied his hold of Armenian rubies, pausing only to recite what sounded like Latin prayers before torching the remaining cargo. What made the Templars truly formidable wasn't just their selective piracy, it was their ability to launder plunder through their own financial networks. A captured load of Cypriot sugar could reappear months later in Marseille's markets with impeccable provenance papers, as if transported through entirely legitimate channels. Their commanderies doubled as fencing operations where stolen goods were inventoried, repacked, and entered into ledgers as donations or tithe payments. Even more audacious was their manipulation of maritime law. When challenged about suspicious cargo, they'd produce beautifully forged bills of lading claiming the goods were salvaged from wrecked vessels, a claim backed by their own notaries and chaplains. Who would dare accuse God's bankers of theft? The order's double game bred resentment that simmered for decades. Muslim chroniclers wrote of cross-wearing sea wolves who struck without warning, while Christian merchants whispered about a shadow fleet that answered only to the Templar treasurer. A particularly damning account survives from a Pisan sailor captured by the Mamluks in 1290. His Arabic jailers recorded his furious accusation that Templar ships had watched from a distance as pirates sacked his convoy, intervening only to claim the choicest spoils as rightful salvage. Whether true or not, the story spread like wildfire through Mediterranean ports, eroding the order's moral authority. Their naval tactics reveal a cold pragmatism beneath the Crusader idealism. Unlike traditional pirates who sought quick profits, the Templars waged economic warfare. Targeting specific trade routes could destabilize entire regions, creating shortages that drove up prices for goods they held in reserve. A single well-timed raid on a Fatimid spice convoy might quadruple the value of their warehouses in Acre. They understood something revolutionary for their age: control the sea lanes and you control the market itself. This wasn't random banditry, it was corporate raiding dressed in monastic robes. The bitter irony, these very skills that built their empire would fuel their downfall. When King Philip Roman IV of France moved against them in 1307, among the damning accusations was that they'd turned their naval might against Christian ships. Whether fact or fabrication, the charge stuck because it confirmed what too many merchants had long suspected. The Templars hadn't just mastered the sea, they'd weaponized it, and in doing so, they'd made enemies as relentless as the tides. Salt was the invisible currency that greased the Templars' economic machine, a humble white crystal more precious than silver in the medieval world. While spices and silks grabbed the historical spotlight, it was the salt routes that quietly bankrolled their most ambitious projects. Picture the vast salt marshes of France's Atlantic coast at dawn, where Templar overseers watched as workers raked glistening mounds of sea salt under the morning sun. This wasn't just seasoning, it was the medieval equivalent of oil, a commodity so vital it could dictate the rise and fall of cities. The genius of their salt operation lay in bridging scarcity and abundance. In Scandinavia, where endless coastlines teemed with herring but lacked natural salt deposits, fishermen faced a cruel paradox: tons of fresh catch rotting within days. Enter the Templars, whose ships arrived like clockwork, each spring bearing holds packed with Breton salt. A single shipload could preserve enough fish to feed entire regions through winter, and the Knights took their cut in silver, dried cod, or prime Baltic timber for their next fortress. Records from Bergen show Templar agents bartering salt for Norwegian shipbuilding expertise, creating a virtuous cycle where food preservation literally built their naval power. Their control extended far beyond transport. Along the Languedoc coast, the order acquired entire salt pans through shrewd deals with local abbeys, often trading spiritual protection for production rights. In Pecais, they engineered an elaborate system of sluice gates and evaporation ponds that tripled output, then enforced a near monopoly by controlling access roads. A merchant's ledger from 1300 reveals the markup. Salt purchased for 2 sous per barrel at Aigues-Mortes, sold for 15 sous in Paris after Templar transport and storage fees. What truly set their salt empire apart was its vertical integration. Unlike haphazard merchant ventures, the Templars managed every link in the chain, from raking to rationing. Their commanderies near saltworks doubled as distribution hubs, where barrels were stamped with coded marks indicating quality and destination. Some were destined for royal kitchens, others for tanning hides in Flanders or curing meats in German monasteries. The same network that moved spices could deliver a ton of salt to a Polish duke's cellar faster than most couriers could carry a letter across the same distance. This unassuming commodity financed their most iconic strongholds, the soaring walls of Chateau Pellerin in the Holy Land, built with profits from Sicilian salt taxed at Acre's ports. The impregnable towers of Toma in Portugal, funded by salt for iron swaps with Basque miners. Even their famed naval headquarters at La Rochelle expanded using revenues from a secret deal, supplying English King John with enough salt to preserve his army's provisions during the Barons' Wars, in exchange for trading privileges that undercut French competitors. The ultimate testament to their mastery lies in the numbers. When Philip Roman IV accountants inventoried Templar assets after the arrests, they found salt stockpiles valued at over 200,000 livres, enough to season every meal in France for a year. But the real treasure wasn't in the vaults, it was in the knowledge that a humble mineral, moved with precision across 3 continents, could erect castles out of thin air and turn monks into merchant princes. Long after their ships vanished from the Atlantic, the ghost of their salt routes lingered in the very stones of Europe, in coastal place names like Salines Templiers, in the enduring wealth of towns they built around salt markets, and in the quiet understanding that sometimes true power comes not from gold or swords, but from knowing how to make even the simplest things indispensable. Deep beneath the Schwarzwald mountains of Germany and the rugged hills of central France, Templar miners toiled by flickering torchlight, their picks striking veins of silver that would bankroll an empire. These weren't just mines, they were the beating heart of a financial system so sophisticated, it blurred the line between commerce and conquest. Every ingot pulled from the earth at sites like Freiburg or Mel bore 2 destinies: to be melted into coins for paying mercenaries in the Holy Land, or to be traded for silks and spices that would fetch fortunes back in Europe. But here's what most histories miss: the Templars didn't just control the silver. They orchestrated its entire journey, from dank tunnels to distant bazaars, using their hidden naval network as the ultimate delivery system. Consider the route of a single silver mark mined in Saxony. First, it traveled west on Templar-guarded wagons to their commandery at Paris, where scribes recorded its weight and purity in encrypted ledgers. Then came the clever part. Instead of shipping raw bullion riskily across bandit-ridden roads, the Knights smelted it into standardized bars stamped with their cross, a medieval version of a trust seal. These bars could move discreetly on their ships, tucked among less conspicuous cargo like wool or wine. By the time that Saxon silver reached Acre, it had transformed into currency to hire Turkish archers or bribe Armenian traders, all while generating profits at every transfer point. But silver was only half the equation. For every shipload of bullion heading east, Templar vessels returned with something even more vital: Damascus steel. Muslim swordsmiths produced blades so flexible yet deadly that crusaders prized them above rubies. The Knights turned this trade into a high-stakes balancing act, smuggling silver to buy weapons that would later be used against the very cultures supplying them. A Genos merchant's diary from 1285 describes a Templar galley unloading strange curved swords wrapped in Persian carpets at Marseille, their destinations whispered to be the Order's armories in Cyprus and Aragon. The real brilliance lay in how these flows reinforced each other. Silver strengthened their military position in the east, which secured trade routes that brought back steel to equip their growing private armies in the west. It created a self-perpetuating cycle of power, one where every transaction served both spiritual and strategic ends. When the Pope demanded explanations for their wealth, the Templars could point piously to their mines as God's providence, while their naval architects designed ships with false bottomed holds to discreetly move the fruits of that providence. Their control over these dual commodities reached absurd levels of precision. In the Languedoc region, Templar factors would time silver shipments to coincide with seasonal fairs in Toulouse, where German metal could be traded for Spanish iron ore that would eventually return east as finished weapons. They even manipulated markets by temporarily flooding ports with silver to depress prices before bulk purchases, a tactic Venetian traders called the Templar Tide. What made this system truly unstoppable was its deniability. A captured Templar ship might legally carry silver under papal license for crusading expenses, while its hidden steel cargo violated trade embargoes with Muslim states. Local officials learned not to ask why certain vessels always rode suspiciously low in the water, their crews unusually muscular for simple transport duty. The Knights had turned the Mediterranean into a giant shell game, where silver and steel perpetually switched places beneath the gaze of kings and caliphs alike. Yet the greatest testament to their mastery wasn't in the grand exchanges, but in the mundane details. Carbon analysis of swords found in Templar sites shows consistent steel quality across decades, proof of an unbroken supply chain that outlasted wars, famines, and papal edicts. Meanwhile, their silver coins became so trusted that Armenian merchants accepted them at face value without weighing, a rarity in an age of currency debasement. The message was clear. From the depths of German mines to the forges of Damascus, the Templars didn't just move goods, they moved confidence itself. And in a fractured medieval world, that intangible commodity proved mightier than any blade. In the dead of night, a sleek Templar dispatch vessel would slip from the shadows of Cyprus's harbor, its lone sailor carrying a message that could shift the balance of power across 3 continents. While medieval monarchs waited weeks for couriers to traverse rutted roads, the Knights had engineered something revolutionary, a maritime postal network so efficient it functioned like the nervous system of their empire. Picture a relay race across the waves. A message from Acre's treasurer would reach Marseille in under 3 weeks, hopping from fast galley to fast galley at predetermined waypoints like Sicily and Crete. Each ship in this chain was stripped of unnecessary weight, no heavy cargo, just rowers trained to maintain a killing pace and captains who navigated by stars rather than cautious coastal hugging. The true genius lay in their synchronization. Unlike merchant vessels that sailed only when holds were full, Templar couriers operated on strict schedules, their departures timed to the hour like modern train services. Commanders in London could send orders to liquidate silver reserves in Paris, knowing the instruction would arrive before competing bankers even heard the market shift. This wasn't just communication, it was temporal warfare, where information moved faster than rivals could react. A surviving ledger from Barcelona details payments to the swift men of the sea, bonuses awarded to crews who shaved days off standard voyage times. Their methods verged on cryptographic art. Messages were encrypted using rotating ciphers based on psalm verses, with duplicate copies sent via separate routes to ensure delivery. One intercepted scroll from 1284 baffled Venetian spies. Its seemingly random Latin phrases concealed market instructions when read with a cipher wheel keyed to the date of the autumn equinox. Even their packaging was ingenious, wax seals embedded with strands of silk that would disintegrate if tampered with, and maps drawn on sheepskin parchment that floated if thrown overboard during pursuit. The intelligence advantages were staggering. While King Philip Roman IV of France relied on provincial governors who took months to report, the Templars received weekly updates on grain harvests from Sicily, pirate activity near Malta, and even the emotional state of the Mamluk Sultan, all filed in Acre's archives under categories like winds of commerce and tides of war. Their agents in Alexandria once used carrier gulls to warn of a sudden spice shortage 3 days before official envoys arrived, allowing the Knights to buy up regional pepper stocks at pre-panic prices. Rumors persist that their signaling systems influenced later naval traditions. Nighttime lantern codes matching specific harbor towers to pre-arranged responses predated Admiral Nelson's famous flags by 5 centuries. A Genos sailor's memoir describes a Templar fleet maneuvering in perfect formation off Sardinia, using nothing but polished shield flashes, a technique the British Royal Navy wouldn't document until the 1700s. Whether myth or fact, the legacy is clear. In an age where most rulers struggled to govern single kingdoms, the Templars administered a maritime empire with the precision of a Swiss watch, their ships carrying not just goods, but the very threads that stitched together their invisible dominion. In the hungry years of the 13th century, when a failed harvest could topple kings, the Templars held a weapon more potent than any sword: the power to feed entire nations. Their fleets didn't just transport grain, they dictated the fate of cities, turning Sicilian wheat and Egyptian barley into levers of control that could lift up allies or crush rebellions with terrifying precision. Picture the docks of Alexandria during a Nile flood failure. Desperate officials bartering sacred relics for Templar grain ships anchored just offshore, their holds bursting with Cypriot harvests purchased months earlier at bargain prices. This wasn't commerce, it was chess played with loaves of bread. The Order's agricultural empire stretched from the volcanic soils of Sicily to the terraced hills of Provence, each estate meticulously chosen for strategic value. Their Sicilian latifundia, vast plantations worked by serfs under Templar overseers, produced surplus grain even in lean years, thanks to irrigation techniques borrowed from Arab agronomists. But the real mastery lay in timing. While local rulers thought seasonally, the Templars planned in decades. They stockpiled grain during glut years in underground silos modeled on ancient Roman horia, then released it during shortages at prices that could bankrupt competing merchants. A ledger from 1291 shows their Marseille commandery selling Sicilian wheat to Genoa for 8 gold bezants per bushel during a famine, triple the usual rate, while donating the same grain to loyal French cities at cost. Their most audacious move was turning famine relief into political theater. When Frederick Roman II wars disrupted Italian grain supplies, Templar ships appeared like miracles in Venetian lagoons, their cargoes distributed free to the poor with one condition. The Order's banners flew prominently over every distribution point, and their chaplains led prayers before meals. Witnesses reported starving mobs chanting Templar mottos between mouthfuls, their bellies full but their loyalties subtly redirected. Meanwhile, cities that resisted Templar financial demands found their usual shipments delayed by sudden pirate threats, threats that curiously never troubled vessels bound for cooperative regions. Cyprus became the linchpin of this system. After acquiring the island in 1291, the Knights transformed its fertile plains into a breadbasket engineered for export. Their innovation, a 3-field rotation system that kept soil fertile year-round, while competing farmers still practiced wasteful slash-and-burn agriculture. Templar agents even introduced drought-resistant wheat varieties from Mesopotamia, creating crops that thrived when others failed. Soon, Cypriot grain was flowing to every crisis point in the Mediterranean, always with strings attached. Armenian chronicles tell of Templar brokers offering lifeline shipments to Cilician Armenia during a Mongol siege, but only after extracting trading privileges that lasted generations. Beneath the veneer of charity simmered ruthless calculation. The orders, famine loans to nobles were secured against future harvests, effectively mortgaging entire regions to their control. In Languedoc, they perfected the art of the grain trap, flooding local markets with cheap imports until farmers abandoned their fields, then buying up the fallow land at pennies per acre. Within decades, they owned the very fields that had once fed independent communes. Even their much-touted hospital network served this system. Infirmaries in Marseille and Acre required patients to reveal local crop conditions during confession, intelligence that guided their next shipments. The ultimate proof of their power came in 1284, when a Templar fleet bypassed a starving Naples to deliver Sicilian grain directly to the Pope's armies, ensuring his campaign against imperial rivals succeeded. A Neapolitan diarist captured the chilling lesson: they do not feed cities, they feed obedience. Whether dispensing alms or withholding shipments, the Templars understood what few medieval powers grasped, that in a world where bread meant survival, controlling its flow meant controlling destiny itself. The vineyards of Provence stretched like an emerald sea beneath the Mediterranean sun, their neat rows of grapes destined not just for communion chalices, but for the holds of Templar ships crisscrossing the known world. While the Order's military exploits filled chronicles, their mastery of the wine trade flowed through history with quieter potency, a blend of piety and profit that turned sacramental necessity into economic alchemy. From the rocky slopes of Languedoc to the terraced hills of Palestine, Templar vintners cultivated vines with the same precision they applied to sword drills, producing vintages so consistent they became the gold standard of medieval Europe. What set their operation apart wasn't just scale, it was science. The Knights pioneered storage techniques that transformed wine from a local commodity into a global asset. Their ships carried amphorae lined with pine resin from Armenian forests, a method borrowed from ancient Greek traders but perfected in Templar cellars. This prevented oxidation during months at sea, allowing their wine to arrive in Acre or London tasting fresher than local tavern swill. Even more ingenious was their use of olive oil seals, pouring a thin layer over the wine's surface to prevent air contact, a trick later adopted by Venetian merchants. A ship's manifest from 1272 boasts of a Bordeaux vintage arriving in Cyprus, as bright as the day it was casked, a near-miraculous claim in an era when most wine turned to vinegar before reaching distant ports. Their sacramental monopoly gave them pricing power that would make modern sommeliers blush. Churches across Europe willingly paid premium prices for Templar wine, believing their monastic oversight ensured purity, no watered-down vintages or smuggled pagan libations. A papal decree from 1241 even mandated that none but Templar and Hospitaller wines be used for the holy mysteries in maritime dioceses, effectively granting them a captive market from Sicily to Scotland. Their commanderies near pilgrimage routes doubled as distribution centers, where a cask of Languedoc red might be exchanged for English silver or Flemish wool, always at a markup that included both transport fees and spiritual reassurance. But the real stroke of genius was their dual-tiered system. The same ships carrying cheap, sturdy wine for mass production also transported rare vintages for elite buyers. Palestinian dessert wines aged in oak from Templar-controlled Armenian forests, or Provençal rosés blended with rose petals for Persian nobility. A ledger from Marseille details a single galley's cargo, 500 amphorae of altar wine labeled with simple crosses, alongside 20 jewel-cased flasks of Jericho nectar destined for a sultan's table. This wasn't just diversification, it was brand stratification centuries before the concept existed. Transitioning seamlessly from grapes to olives, the order applied similar ingenuity to their liquid gold. Templar groves in Apulia and the Levant produced oil so pure it became the medieval equivalent of a certification mark. Their ships transported it in glazed ceramic containers modeled after Roman designs, each stamped with a cross to guarantee authenticity. Like their wine, it served dual purposes, fueling chapel lamps across Christendom, while commanding premium prices as a cooking staple in markets from Alexandria to Bruges. A single Templar oil shipment could finance a month's payroll for an entire commandery, proving that sometimes the mightiest treasures came not from vaults or battlefields, but from the patient cultivation of earth and sea. While wine flowed through Templar trade networks like sacramental blood, another liquid fueled their empire with quiet, steady brilliance: olive oil, the Mediterranean's golden elixir. Pressed from sun-drenched groves in Andalusia and the Peloponnese, this humble commodity became the Order's secret weapon, greasing the gears of their economy from monastery kitchens to battlefield infirmaries. Picture the terraced hills of southern Spain at harvest time, where Templar overseers watched as workers beat ancient trees with long poles, their baskets filling with plump olives destined for stone mills. What emerged wasn't just cooking oil, it was light, medicine, currency, and above all, a financial lifeline that flowed as reliably as the tides. The Knights' groves in Andalusia tell a story of agricultural cunning. After the Reconquista reclaimed lands from Moorish rule, the Templars negotiated exemptions from royal taxes on oil for sacred purposes, a loophole that let them dominate production. Their Andalusian mills adopted Muslim techniques using granite crushing stones and woven reed mats for pressing, but added a logistical twist. Instead of selling locally, they stockpiled oil in coastal warehouses like Almeria, where ships could swiftly transport it north. A single galley leaving Malaga might carry enough oil to illuminate every chapel in Normandy for a month, its cargo carefully layered in ceramic jugs cushioned with aromatic herbs to prevent shattering. Greek groves played a different but equally vital role. On the slopes of Mount Tegitos, the Order cultivated rare, peppery Koroniki olives, prized for their high yield and medicinal properties. Here, they didn't just farm, they engineered entire landscapes. Byzantine records describe Templar agents redirecting mountain springs to irrigate their groves while leaving rival plots parched. The payoff came in quality. Their Spartan oil fetched triple the price of common varieties in markets like Constantinople, where it was rubbed on athletes' muscles and dabbed on noble infants' gums. Northern Europe's hunger for this liquid gold bordered on desperation. In foggy London or rainy Bruges, where olive trees couldn't survive, Templar oil arrived like manna from a warmer world. Monasteries burned it in sanctuary lamps, believing its clean flame warded off evil spirits. Wealthy households used it to dress wounds, following medical texts that claimed Templar oil never turned rancid. Even the Order's critics couldn't resist its allure when the Bishop of Mainz accused them of heresy in 1289. He still purchased their oil by the barrel for his private infirmary. Their hospitals turned oil into both treatment and propaganda. In Acre's infirmary, burn victims were wrapped in linen soaked in oil-scented balms, the scent itself becoming synonymous with Templar care. Lepers received daily doses mixed with honey and sulfur, a remedy so trusted that pilgrims carried flasks home as holy relics. But the real masterstroke was how they weaponized compassion. During sieges, Templar surgeons would lower baskets of oil-soaked bandages to enemy camps, a gesture that bought goodwill and often valuable intelligence from grateful recipients. The Levant trade revealed oil's most surprising role as a shadow currency. In Jerusalem's markets, a flask of Templar oil could buy everything from a camel's load of dates to a silversmith's silence. Muslim chroniclers noted Christian and Jewish merchants preferring it to coinage when trading among themselves, since its value remained stable while currencies fluctuated. The Knights exploited this mercilessly, accepting oil as loan collateral at deflated values, then selling it at premium prices during Ramadan when demand for frying sweets skyrocketed. What made this unassuming commodity truly transformative was its predictability. While spice prices swung wildly and silver supplies fluctuated, olive oil flowed as steadily as the seasons. A bad harvest might dent profits but never collapse them. The Templars' diversified groves ensured that if Andalusia failed, Greece would compensate. This reliability let them underwrite riskier ventures, using oil revenues as ballast for speculative trades in silks or mercury. Ledgers from Marseille show oil accounting for nearly a third of their steadfast incomes, the financial bedrock that allowed their more dazzling exploits. The ultimate testament to its value lies in the aftermath of their downfall. When Philip Roman IV agents seized Templar assets, they found oil stockpiles so vast that royal governors used them to pacify rebellious towns, distributing it freely to the poor while withholding grain. Even in ruin, the Order's liquid gold bought loyalty they no longer lived to claim. Today, walking through abandoned Templar mills in Spain, you can still smell traces of olives in ancient pressing stones, a faint but stubborn reminder that empires aren't just built on swords and silver, but on the quiet, relentless accumulation of everyday necessities. Beneath the Templars' martial facade lay an unexpected mastery of something far more delicate: the art of scent. While swords and silver built their empire, it was cinnamon, myrrh, and pepper that oiled its gears, turning these warrior monks into unlikely lords of the medieval perfume trade. Imagine the hold of a Templar galley. Beneath sacks of grain and crates of weapons, small cedar boxes held treasures more precious by weight than gold Arabian frankincense resin, glowing like amber, saffron threads from Kashmir, so vibrant they stained fingers yellow, black pepper from Malabar that could ransom a village. These weren't just spices, they were the ultimate stealth commodity, compact enough to smuggle yet valuable enough to finance entire campaigns. The Knights' edge came from access few Europeans could match. Their alliances with Eastern monasteries, Armenian, Coptic, and even Nestorian Christian communities along the Silk Road gave them backdoor routes to aromatics otherwise blocked by Muslim middlemen. A Templar agent in Antioch might receive a cryptic message from a Syrian monk about a caravan of sacred smoke, code for frankincense, arriving from Oman, then dispatch riders to intercept it before it reached Damascus's markets. Their commanderies in Cyprus became scent distillation hubs, where alchemists blended rare ingredients into ointments for the sick, and discreetly, into perfumes for nobles who paid handsomely for exclusivity. A papal envoy's report from 1271 grumbles about Templar brothers, reeking not of piety but Persian attar, a clue to their double life as holy warriors and luxury purveyors. Transporting these treasures required ingenuity. Pepper, lightweight and non-perishable, could be sewn into pilgrims' garments or packed in false-bottomed reliquaries. Myrrh, sticky and pungent, traveled in wax-sealed horns designed to look like liturgical objects, but their real innovation was in the ledgers listing high-value spices as medical supplies or liturgical necessities to bypass customs. A single Templar ship might declare 10 pounds of frankincense for church use while secretly carrying 200 in hidden compartments, the discrepancy lost in bureaucratic fog. The relics trade took this deception to dazzling heights. When transporting a supposed fragment of the true cross from Constantinople to Paris, Templar sailors would pack the holy wood in layers of silk and cinnamon, not just for reverence, but because the spice's overpowering scent masked more illicit cargo beneath. Pilgrims kissing a saint's bones in charters had no idea their devotion funded a covert operation where sacred and profane blurred seamlessly. Tomorrow, we'll unravel how these holy smuggling networks collapsed and why the Templars' greatest strength became their fatal flaw. In the dim candlelight of a Templar chapel, a priest would lift a gilded reliquary for pilgrims to behold inside, a fragment of bone said to belong to St. George or a thread from the Virgin Mary's cloak. The air hummed with reverence, but also with something far more earthly, the clink of coins in the donation box. The Templars didn't just transport relics, they orchestrated their entire economy, turning sacred objects into a medieval version of high-stakes commodities trading. A single shard of the true cross could transform a remote commandery into a pilgrimage site overnight, its coffers overflowing with offerings from the faithful. And the Knights, with their unrivaled access to the Holy Land's sacred sites, positioned themselves as the ultimate middlemen between heaven's treasures and Europe's desperate piety. The logistics of this trade were as ingenious as they were irreverent. Templar ships returning from Acre might carry caskets labeled as medical supplies or liturgical wine, their true contents far more precious, a saint's tooth wrapped in silk, a vial of Mary's milk, actually ground alabaster, or even entire mummified hands said to belong to martyrs. The Order's network of monasteries and churches provided perfect distribution points where relics could be discovered with theatrical flair. A chronicle from Chartres describes how Templars unearthed a chest of saintly bones beneath their chapel's foundation during renovations, conveniently timed to coincide with a rival bishop's pilgrimage campaign. Skeptics whispered, but the crowds came anyway, their donations funding the next round of sacred acquisitions. Authenticity was a fluid concept in this market. When demand outstripped supply, the Knights became adept at multiplying relics. A single thorn from Christ's crown might be split into a dozen fragments, each encased in identical crystal reliquaries sent to different commanderies. Their greatest coup came with the discovery of multiple fragments of the true cross, each accompanied by sworn testimonies from Armenian monks or Byzantine scholars. A Venetian merchant's diary wryly notes that if all the Templar-certified cross fragments were assembled, they'd form a timber pile large enough to rebuild Noah's Ark. Yet few dared voice such doubts aloud. To question a relic's legitimacy was to risk divine wrath and the Templars' considerable earthly influence. The real profits lay in pilgrimage routes. A commandery housing a notable relic became a mandatory stop for travelers who needed food, lodging, and critically, souvenirs. Templar-run scriptoriums produced tiny lead badges stamped with the relic's image, which pilgrims purchased as proof of their journey. Inns under order control charged premium rates during feast days, while local markets paid fees to operate near their churches. Even the relics themselves circulated like medieval NFTs, loaned between commanderies for visitations, with hosting rights negotiated like modern sports arena bookings. A single year's revenue from the Cloak of St. Martin's tour through Aquitaine reportedly financed an entire fleet of Corsican patrol galleys. but the darkest whispers concerned relics that never existed at all. In the chaotic aftermath of the sack of Constantinople in 1204, countless sacred objects vanished into the shadows only to resurface decades later in Templar custody with suspiciously perfect provenance. A Cistercian abbot's letter complains of a Templar commander displaying the head of John the Baptist in Provence, despite another skull claiming the same identity already drawing crowds in Damascus. The knights navigated these contradictions with practiced ambiguity, their chaplains emphasizing that faith, not forensic evidence, determined a relic's power. After all, as one treasurer reportedly quipped while counting pilgrimage coins, a doubter's gold spends just as well as a believer's. What began as spiritual stewardship had morphed into something far more complex, a system where the line between devotion and commerce blurred beyond recognition. The Templars didn't invent the relic trade, but they refined it into a precision instrument, one that played on medieval Europe's deepest hopes and fears. Whether the bones they sold were genuine mattered less than the certainty they sold with them, a commodity as timeless as human longing itself. Beneath the white mantles of piety, the Templars ran one of history's most ingenious protection rackets, not with swords, but with parchment and promises. Imagine a Genos merchant sweating over his ledger in a Marseille tavern, calculating whether to risk his entire fortune on a shipment of Cypriot wool. Pirates prowled the waters between Crete and Alexandria. Storms could swallow whole fleets without a trace. Enter the Templar notary sliding onto the bench beside him, offering a solution as audacious as it was irresistible. Pay a percentage of the cargo's value upfront, and the order would guarantee its safe delivery. If disaster struck, the merchant would recover every penny from Templar treasuries across Europe. It wasn't just insurance, it was a psychological masterstroke that turned fear into profit. The system relied on two pillars only the Templars could provide. First, their chain of coastal fortresses functioned like medieval surveillance satellites. From the towering walls of Chateau Pellerin in the Levant to the watchtowers dotting Sicily's coastline, their garrisons monitored shipping lanes with hawk-like precision. A corsair fleet massing near Rhodes would trigger a relay of signal fires, warning insured ships to reroute while Templar galleys scrambled to intercept the threat. Second, their reputation for ruthless enforcement deterred would-be thieves. Pirates learned the hard way that stealing a Templar-guaranteed cargo meant facing not just angry merchants, but an order that could place bounties on their heads from London to Acre. A surviving Mamluk court record describes the grisly fate of a raider who seized an insured spice ship, his head delivered to Acre's harbor master in a sack of salt, a Templar cross carved into his forehead as a receipt. But the real brilliance lay in the math. Their actuaries, though they wouldn't have called them that, kept meticulous records of seasonal piracy patterns, weather risks, and even the reputations of individual captains. A voyage from Barcelona to Beirut in May might carry a 5% premium, while the same route in November with its deadly mistrals could cost 20. They pooled risk across thousands of shipments, ensuring that even major losses like the 1287 sinking of the Santa Lucia, insured for a staggering 8,000 gold bezants, could be covered without flinching. A ledger from Marseille reveals their cold calculus. Over a decade, only 1 in 15 insured ships was lost, while premiums from the other 14 generated profits exceeding 200,000 silver marks. Merchants paid gladly, and not just for the financial safety. Insured cargo moved faster through ports as Templar-stamped manifests bypassed customs inspections. Their guarantee became a de facto letter of credit, allowing traders to secure loans against promised deliveries. A Flemish wool exporter could walk into any Templar commandery from Bruges to Jerusalem, and borrow against his insured shipment before it even arrived, a liquidity revolution that supercharged medieval commerce. This all hinged on something far more volatile than parchment: the constant flow of bullion across their network. Every insurance payout in Acre required silver from Paris. Every loan issued in Sicily needed backing from German mines. The Knights became masters of metallic arbitrage, shifting reserves to where demand spiked. A bad harvest in Languedoc might drain silver from Toulouse, while a spice glut in Alexandria would flood Cyprus with gold dinars. Their ships didn't just carry wealth, they functioned as the circulatory system of a financial body spanning continents, where a delayed galley could mean bankruptcy in Barcelona and windfalls in Venice. Yet for all its sophistication, the system had a fatal vulnerability. The Templars' entire empire relied on trust, the unshakable belief that any commandery would honor commitments written in another language, another land. As long as that faith held, their notes were as good as gold. But when whispers of insolvency began circulating in the early 14th century, merchants would discover the terrifying truth about their guarantees. They were only as solid as the last shipment of silver to reach the vaults. Moonlight glinted off the waves as a Templar treasure galley sliced through the Black Sea's Inkai waters, its hull riding suspiciously low despite modest manifests listing only ecclesiastical supplies. These weren't ordinary ships, they were floating fortresses, their construction hiding innovations centuries ahead of their time. Beneath decks reinforced with iron bands lay a labyrinth of false compartments, their access points concealed behind altars or beneath sleeping quarters. Some held silver ingots cast to resemble roofing tiles, others concealed gold dust packed into sacks of flour or dissolved in vinegar, a trick borrowed from Byzantine alchemists that let them pour fortunes through inspection sieves. The Knights' maritime architects even designed special bilge systems where precious metals could be dumped and recovered later, leaving pursuing pirates baffled by suddenly buoyant hulls. The stakes couldn't have been higher. A single shipment from the silver mines of Freiburg to Acre's mints could represent the annual tax revenue of a mid-sized kingdom. That's why these convoys operated with near-military discipline. Advanced scouts checking for ambushes, coded flags signaling course changes, and according to a captured Sicilian pirate's confession, a protocol requiring captains to ignite their own powder stores if capture became inevitable. Better to feed the fish than fill a sultan's coffers, one Templar sea manual reportedly advised. Their most infamous safeguard was the two-key system. Treasurers in departure and arrival ports each held half of a cipher needed to open bullion chests, ensuring mutinous crews couldn't access the goods mid-voyage. Legends cling to these ships like barnacles, the most enduring tells of a fleet that vanished from La Rochelle in 1307, carrying what chroniclers called the heart of the Templar treasure. Some claim the ships reached Scotland, funding Robert the Bruce's rebellion. Others whisper they anchored in a hidden Nova Scotia cove, their cargo later inspiring the Oak Island myth. Portuguese sailors still talk of a ghost galley seen off Saga's Point during full moons, its sails emblazoned with a fading red cross. The truth may be simpler but no less dramatic. Port records show at least 3 treasure galleys unaccounted for during the order's suppression, their disappearance timed suspiciously close to King Philip's arrest warrants. Yet the greatest mystery isn't where the gold went. It's whether the Templars' very mastery of moving it sealed their fate. Their bullion network gave them something more dangerous than wealth: independence. While kings relied on temperamental nobles for taxes, the Knights could fund armies or embargo enemies with the stroke of a quill. When Philip Roman IV demanded loans to cover his disastrous wars, Templar treasurers reportedly asked for collateral, an unthinkable slight to royal pride. Their ships had become too fast, their vaults too deep, their financial reach too invisible to control. In an age when rulers equated economic power with treason, the Templars didn't just transport gold, they challenged the divine right of kings to monopolize it. The same innovations that built their empire may have painted crosshairs on their backs. The Mediterranean's moonlit coves hid more than just Templar galleys. They sheltered a shadow fleet of Catalan corsairs whose sails bore no red crosses but served the Order's interests with ruthless precision. These weren't ordinary pirates, they were deniable assets operating under a veil of semi-independence that let the Knights harass rivals without ever dirtying their white mantles. Take the infamous raid on a Venetian spice convoy off Crete in 1289. Witnesses described attackers flying the pennant of a disgraced Genos noble, yet their tactics, methodical targeting of only Venetian ships, leaving Templar-associated vessels untouched, bore the hallmarks of a precision strike. The spoils, a fortune in pepper and cinnamon that mysteriously surfaced months later in Barcelona's markets, sold through Catalan middlemen who conveniently funneled a portion of profits to a charitable fund managed by Templar notaries. The Catalans' value lay in their ambiguity. Officially, these captains were outlaws, their letters of marque revoked by the Crown of Aragon. Yet their home ports of Tortosa and Tarragona always seemed to overlook their return, provided they brought enough plunder to stimulate local economies. A Templar commander's private correspondence, unearthed in a Valencia monastery, spells out the arrangement. Our friends of the sea shall trouble those who trouble us. Their sins are theirs alone, but their victories we may share. This wasn't just tacit approval, it was a financial ecosystem. Corsairs received intelligence on target movements from Templar coastal watchtowers, while the Order's commanderies laundered stolen goods through their network of Levantine warehouses. Some attacks were too blatant to ignore. When a Pisan grain fleet bound for Anjou vanished near Mallorca in 1294, the Catalans blamed storm winds. Yet Angevin spies later reported seeing the same wheat sacks in Templar-controlled Montpellier, stamped with Pisan merchant marks hastily scraped away. More damning was the timing. The raid coincided with a Templar-backed rebellion in Naples, where Anjou's troops starved without those supplies. The Knights' ledgers from that year show a suspicious donation of 10,000 silver sous to the rebel leader, recorded just days after the lost shipment reached port. Royal courts saw through the ruse. French chroniclers began calling the Catalans the Templars' sea wolves, while Aragonese officials grumbled about monks who wage war by proxy. The tension came to a head when a corsair captain named Ramon de Solas was captured with a Templar-issued astrolabe. Its calibration markings matched those used exclusively in the Order's navigation manuals. Under torture, he confessed to receiving certain advices from a brother in Tortosa, sparking a diplomatic crisis that forced the Templars to publicly excommunicate him. The theatrics fooled no one. De Solas's family received regular payments from a Barcelona merchant house with Templar ties until his execution. This shadow navy's greatest legacy wasn't in battles won, but in fear sown. Merchants from Marseille to Alexandria began paying voluntary tariffs to Templar ports, not for protection from the Knights themselves, but from the spectral threat of Catalan vengeance. The system worked flawlessly until the day the Order's enemies realized that to break the Templars, they first had to dry up the sea of deniability that let their pirate allies thrive. When the arrests came in 1307, among King Philip's first acts was offering pardons to any corsair who turned over Templar navigation charts, proof that the real treasure wasn't gold, but the knowledge of how to move invisibly across the waves. By the dawn of the 14th century, the Templars' naval dominance had become a kingmaker's nightmare, a web of silent ships and hidden harbors that rendered borders meaningless. For Philip Roman IV of France, staring at maps in his Paris chambers, those unmarked galleys represented something far more dangerous than wealth. They were floating fortresses of independence, capable of whisking entire armies beyond his grasp or flooding rival kingdoms with silver to fuel rebellions. The same network that had once secured Christian pilgrim routes now threatened to upend the very notion of royal authority. A surviving memo from Philip's advisors lays bare the terror. These monk knights move men and metal like chess pieces, while our galleys rot in Calais waiting for fair winds. The crisis crystallized in 1294, when Templar ships defied Philip's embargo against England, ferrying Flemish wool to Portsmouth despite royal decrees. Witnesses reported sails bearing no insignia, crews speaking Breton or Arabic to confuse pursuers. More alarming than the act itself was the aftermath. When Philip's agents demanded the culprits' names, Templar officials produced impeccably forged documents showing the vessels belonged to Neapolitan merchants. The message was clear: their maritime empire operated in a shadow realm where kings held no jurisdiction. Rumors swirled of even darker capabilities. Intelligence from Genoa suggested Templar galleys could transport 1,000 troops from Marseille to Bordeaux in under 10 days, twice the speed of royal fleets. Their Cyprus squadron reportedly practiced amphibious landings under cover of darkness, while Sicilian fishermen spoke of black ships testing Greek fire near Malta. Whether true or exaggerated, these tales painted a picture of a parallel naval power that could, if provoked, turn the Mediterranean into a Templar lake. Philip's breaking point came in 1306, when Templar financiers abruptly called in loans to the French crown, a move historians now recognize as economic warfare. As royal coffers emptied, the king's spies made a chilling discovery. The order had quietly shifted bullion reserves from Paris to La Rochelle, where their fastest ships lay anchored. Treasury records show frantic efforts to track the money's flow, but Templar bookkeepers had deployed their signature weapon: obfuscation. Loans were split across dozens of commanderies, silver was relabeled as church plate, and one particularly brazen ledger listed 200,000 livres simply as alms for Saracen orphans. The stage was set for history's most dramatic maritime vanishing act. On October 12, 1307, the eve of mass arrests, Philip's coastal watchtowers reported unusual activity at La Rochelle. By dawn, 18 Templar vessels had slipped their moorings, their holds allegedly stuffed with archives, relics, and enough gold to bankrupt kingdoms. The king's men found empty docks, cold hearths in the commandery, and a single mocking clue: a ledger left open to a page detailing Christ's admonition that a man's life consists not in the abundance of his possessions. Whether the fleet escaped to Scotland, Portugal, or some uncharted cove scarcely mattered. Their disappearance proved the Templars' final lesson: that true power lies not in castles or crowns, but in the ability to dissolve into the waves like salt in seawater. Dawn broke over La Rochelle on October 13, 1307, a date that would echo through history with eerie infamy, but the harbor stood unsettlingly empty. Just hours before, King Philip Roman IV soldiers had stormed Templar commanderies across France, their orders crisp and brutal: seize the knights, confiscate their wealth, break their power. Yet when the king's men reached this crucial Atlantic port, they found ghostly wharves and cold hearths. Fishermen whispered of a flurry of activity in the dead of night, sails unfurling without lanterns, oars dipping silently into black water. One account from a drunken dockworker described a line of hooded figures loading chests onto the last ship, their silhouettes backlit by sudden torchlight as the vessel slipped seaward. By sunrise, 18 Templar ships had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only ripples and rumors. Theories about their fate spiral as wildly as a medieval map's edge. Some insist the fleet made for Scotland, where Robert the Bruce, excommunicated and desperate, would have welcomed both their gold and their battle-hardened knights. Others point to Portugal, where Templar assets mysteriously morphed into the Order of Christ, its sailors later guiding Vasco da Gama's voyages. More fantastical claims suggest the ships crossed the Atlantic, their navigational secrets fueling later tales of Oak Island's buried treasure or Newport's mysterious stone tower. A surviving letter from a Breton monk adds fuel to the fire. They carried not just gold, but the very memory of their order, books that could unmake kings. What truly chills historians isn't the missing bullion, but the missing knowledge. Templar maritime archives, meticulous records of currents, hidden harbors, and trade routes never surfaced in Philip's inventories. Were these the books the monk described? Their ship designs too disappeared. Unlike the clumsy cogs of their era, Templar galleys were lean and swift, with hulls reinforced by techniques modern shipwrights still debate. A single surviving sketch from a Genos rival shows a peculiar keel shape, a design that resurfaced centuries later in Portuguese caravels. Perhaps their greatest legacy lies in the paradox they embodied: monks who became merchants, warriors who mastered logistics, and crusaders who understood that true power flowed not through conquest but through connections. The Mediterranean they once ruled still bears their invisible stamp. In the trading hubs they established, the financial instruments they pioneered, and the unshakable truth that in a world of swords and superstition, they chose to wield something far more enduring: the relentless, whispering tide of commerce. Their ships may have vanished, but their influence lingers like salt on the wind. The Templars may have vanished into history's shadows, but their naval playbook was far too valuable to disappear. Within decades of their dissolution, their techniques resurfaced in the hands of unlikely successors, rivals, and allies alike who recognized the brilliance of their systems. Take the Knights Hospitaller, who inherited not just Templar properties in Cyprus but their maritime playbook. Their galleys adopted the same lean designs, their spies infiltrated the same ports, and their ledgers used eerily similar encryption. When Hospitaller privateers began intercepting Ottoman ships with uncanny precision in the 1500s, they were employing intelligence networks the Templars had woven centuries earlier. Even their flagship base on Malta echoed Templar strategy, an island fortress controlling Mediterranean choke points, just as Rhodes and Acre had before it. Venice's merchant princes proved even more adept students. The Serenissimo's famed Arsenal, a shipbuilding marvel that could produce a war galley in a single day, borrowed directly from Templar standardized construction methods. Their banking innovations, from letters of credit to maritime insurance, were near replicas of systems the Knights had perfected. Most tellingly, Venetian maps began showing mysterious annotations, symbols marking hidden freshwater springs and seasonal currents that matched Templar portlands. A Doge's private diary from 1342 admits as much. "We have learned from the monks of the sea that to master trade, one must first master its invisible roads." Those roads outlived their creators, the very shipping lanes the Templars pioneered. From La Rochelle's salt routes to the Cyprus-Alexandria spice run, became the superhighways of Renaissance commerce. Genos carracks followed their paths to the Black Sea, Portuguese caravels traced their Atlantic courses, and even the Hanseatic League adopted their bulk cargo techniques for Baltic grain. The Knights' greatest innovation wasn't any single route, but the concept of treating the sea as a coordinated system rather than a chaotic void. Modern oceanographers have found medieval sailing directions in Arab and Catalan texts that mirror Templar logs, almost verbatim proof their knowledge seeped into global navigation. Perhaps their most controversial legacy lies in the age of exploration. Among Columbus's personal papers was a heavily annotated copy of Imago Mundi, a geographical work citing Templar-friendly sources. His proposed westward route to Asia followed currents the Knights were known to exploit between the Azores and Newfoundland. While no smoking gun ties him directly to Templar secrets, the parallels are striking. The same Lisbon cosmographers who advised Portuguese explorers were heirs to Templar cartographic traditions, and the Canary Islands, Columbus's launching point, had been a documented Templar resupply station. Was his voyage inspired by whispers of lands the Knights may have reached? We'll never know for certain, but the timing is provocative. His sails unfurled barely a century after the last Templar ships vanished into legend. The true measure of their naval genius isn't in what they built, but in how thoroughly their methods became the Mediterranean's silent operating system. Long after their white mantles faded from memory, merchants still paid premiums for Templar-style insurance, captains still consulted charts based on their soundings, and bankers still honored letters of credit modeled on their encrypted parchments. Like a ship's wake dissolving into the sea, their influence became invisible yet inescapable, a testament to the enduring power of those who don't just sail the waves, but learn to write upon them. Beneath the sparkling waters off Cyprus, a team of marine archaeologists hovers over a sonar image that could rewrite history, a jagged outline resting 40 meters down, its shape suspiciously reminiscent of a medieval galley. This isn't just any shipwreck, it's one of dozens of potential Templar vessels now being hunted with cutting-edge technology. Over the past decade, underwater surveys have revealed tantalizing clues. Iron anchors stamped with faint crosses near La Rochelle, a pile of silver ingots stacked with military precision off Malta, even a 13th-century rudder discovered in the Black Sea that matches descriptions of Templar ghost ships from Venetian chronicles. Each find sparks the same electrifying question: could these sunken hulks hold the physical proof of the Order's maritime empire, or even whisper it a fragment of their legendary lost treasure? Identifying a Templar wreck is like solving a mystery where the clues are scattered across 8 centuries. Unlike the ornate vessels of Venice or Genoa, Templar ships were deliberately unremarkable: no carved figureheads, no painted hulls, no flags except when absolutely necessary. Modern researchers must rely on subtle forensic details, the type of wood, often oak from Baltic forests the Knights controlled, the arrangement of ballast stones matching patterns found in Templar harbors, or the eerie absence of personal effects among the wreckage. A recent discovery near Famagusta, Cyprus, exemplifies the challenge. Sonar scans showed a hull packed with lead ingots, a metal the Templars mined extensively in France, but the smoking gun came from dendrochronology. Tree ring dating proved the timbers were felled in the 1250s, exactly when the Order was secretly fortifying Cyprus against Mamluk invasion. The real excitement lies in what hasn't yet been recovered. Medieval accounts speak of Templar ships carrying chests sealed with 3 keys and sacred cargoes too precious to name. In 2021, a remotely operated vehicle probing a wreck off Collioure, France, spotted something chillingly precise: an iron-bound chest wedged beneath a collapsed mast, its lock mechanism still intact. The local archaeological authority quickly classified the site, but not before sonar images leaked online, showing oblong shadows inside that could be anything from silver chalices to encrypted ledgers. Even more provocative are the persistent rumors of a gold galley lost near Bonifacio Strait, where fishermen have dragged up Byzantine coins for generations. Marine geologists now suspect a landslide buried the wreck under sediment, preserving it like a time capsule waiting for the right storm to expose it. Yet the hunt is as much about bites as barnacles. Archaeologists are deploying hyperspectral imaging to detect trace metals in seawater, a technique that recently pinpointed a cannonball cache near Acre without disturbing the seabed. Machine learning algorithms scour historical climate data to predict where storms likely scattered Templar fleets, while DNA analysis of shipworm populations helps track timber trade routes. The ultimate goal, creating a digital fingerprint of Templar maritime activity, mapping not just where their ships sank, but how they moved, what they carried, and who they truly served. What keeps historians awake at night isn't the gold or jewels that might surface, it's the potential for a single wreck to rewrite our understanding of medieval power. Imagine uncovering a captain's logbook preserved in an airtight chest, its pages detailing covert deals between Templar commanders and Mamluk sultans. Or finding the fabled Navigation Codex, said to contain star charts so accurate they could guide a ship from Marseille to Alexandria without sighting land. These aren't just relics, they're missing chapters in a story we've only pieced together from whispers and fragments. Every corroded nail, every distorted sonar blob, could be the key to unraveling history's most enigmatic naval network, one silent wreck at a time. The Templars' true legacy wasn't carved into the stones of their castles or etched onto battlefield trophies. It was written in the salt-stained timbers of their ships and the ink of their encrypted ledgers. These warrior monks built an economic machine so sophisticated that it turned the medieval Mediterranean into their private ledger, where every wave seemed to whisper profits. From the salt pans of southern France to the spice markets of Alexandria, their network moved wealth with a precision that would make modern logistics firms envious. But here's what history often overlooks. Their genius wasn't just in moving goods, but in controlling the very arteries through which trade flowed. They didn't just participate in markets, they redesigned them. Consider the sheer audacity of their system. A pilgrim could deposit funds in London and withdraw them in Jerusalem using a coded chit of parchment, a feat comparable to walking into a modern ATM and finding your bank account had followed you across continents. Their ships didn't just dodge pirates, they exploited seasonal currents and lunar cycles to shave weeks off standard voyage times. Even their failures revealed their reach when King Philip's men stormed Templar commanderies. They found warehouses stuffed with Venetian glassware, Moorish ceramics, and Persian carpets, all bearing identical inventory marks, proof of a quality control system centuries ahead of its time. What makes their story truly compelling is the duality at its core. These were men who knelt in prayer at dawn and negotiated shipping contracts by noon, who swore vows of poverty while orchestrating deals that could bankrupt kingdoms. Their piety wasn't hypocrisy, it was their brand. In an age where trust was scarcer than gold, their sacred oaths became the ultimate credit guarantee. A Templar's handshake meant more than any notarized contract because breaking it risked not just earthly penalties, but eternal damnation. Yet beneath the white mantles beat the hearts of ruthless pragmatists. When Muslim merchants offered better terms on Damascus steel, the Templars traded with them despite preaching holy war. When Catalan pirates proved useful, they turned a blind eye to their raids on Christian ships. Their ledgers didn't distinguish between faithful and infidel, only between profit and loss. This calculated flexibility made them not just wealthy, but indispensable. Kings might distrust them, popes might question them, but no one could afford to ignore the order that held the keys to 3 continents' commerce. Today's global economy still echoes with their innovations. The container ships crossing the Suez Canal follow routes the Templars mapped 8 centuries ago. Offshore banking hubs in Cyprus and Malta operate on principles they pioneered. Even cryptocurrencies' encrypted transactions bear an uncanny resemblance to their system of letters of credit, which makes you wonder if shadow networks just as sophisticated as the Templars exist today, would we even recognize them? The most powerful systems are often the ones designed to be invisible. So were they holy warriors or history's first multinational corporation? The answer might be both. In an era when faith and finance were inseparable, the Templars mastered both with equal fervor. Their real weapon wasn't the sword but the ledger, their true conquest not land but logistics. As you scroll through today's digital marketplaces or watch container ships glide past on your phone's tracking app, remember, the invisible architecture of global trade still bears the fingerprints of those white-clad monks who first understood that wealth doesn't flow through kingdoms, but through channels only the initiated can see. Now it's your turn. Do you think modern equivalents of the Templar network still operate in today's shadow economy? Drop your theories in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into history's hidden architectures. The past isn't just prologue, it's often the playbook.